Hello to everybody, and thanks to the organizers of Mapicon for allowing me to, participate in this wonderful academic feast. So I'll be talking of in the next few minutes an important health concern for women, and that's menopausal transition and the health issues that are associated with menopausal transition. Now, menopause is a major transition period for all women, and we often do not appreciate the impact of menopause that it has on a woman's mental, psychological, physical health, as her social interactions with her family and the society at large. So, what basically is menopause? That this is there occurs a gradual decline in ovarian function, which ultimately results in permanent cessation of the menstrual cycles. So that's traditionally what we understand, that menopause is when after the woman has had the last menstrual cycle. A year after that, we say that menopause has happened. But we have to understand that there are stages through which this transition occurs. Following a normal reproductive life, the woman enters a period of about 5 to 10 years, that is perimenopausal period, in which there occurs a gradual decline in ovarian function. So the cycles may become irregular or delayed, or there might be early cycles also in between, or heavy menstruation. And this is then followed by a period of permanent cessation of menstruation. There will be a reproductive decline that happens in this transition period. So there is a gradual decrease in the ovarian follicle count, and eventually the follicle count is lost, and there is also associated infertility. Following the period, the early first of 4 to 5 years is the early menopause, and thereafter, after about 7, 8, 10 years, is the postmenopausal period, in which there's early postmenopause and late postmenopausal period. Again, we'll see what kind of health issues a woman can encounter in these periods. This, as I said earlier, is a major milestone in the life of a woman that goes beyond reproductive aging. So it's not just a decline in reproductive function, but it also has physical, mental, and other health consequences. So what are the hormonal changes that typically occur during menopause? The hallmark, of course, is estrogen deprivation. So there is a decrease in the circulating estrogen levels, which is associated with an associated increase in FSH and LH levels. At the same time, there is a decline in functional androgen levels, in the form of that the DHEA levels would be reduced, or there would be a reduction in androgen secretion also. But if you look at the ratio between estrogen to androgens, actually the androgens are higher in proportion to estrogens. So some women can also have, postmenopausal hirsutism happening. Then associated with this, we also have to understand the woman is also growing old. So there is senescence happening, and changes related to that will also impact her health. So if you look at the general trends of our society, the age of menopause has relatively remained constant at around 48 plus minus 3 or 4 years on either side, but life expectancy has increased significantly, thereby meaning that we'll have a large proportion of our female population who would be spending a lot of time in the postmenopausal period. So what are the main concerns for a menopausal woman? Reproductive, we already talked about. There is a decrease in ovarian function and the follicle count, so fertility does go down. The most troublesome symptoms for most females are vasomotor symptoms, in the form of menopausal hot flushes, night sweats, restlessness, etc., which can significantly impair the quality of life. Then there are genitourinary symptoms. Both vasomotor and genitourinary symptoms are predominantly driven by estrogen deficiency. So there might be vaginal dryness, lack of lubrication, dyspareunia. Then this gradually translates into female sexual dysfunction, and long-standing, there might be urinary incontinence, vaginal atrophy, and the bladder dysfunctions. The menopause can also have a significant impact on psychosomatic health. directly as a result of estrogen deficiency and senescence, but also because of the other symptoms that are manifesting in this period. And there is an increased prevalence of depression and related disorders. Very importantly, we have to appreciate that menopause also impacts cardiometabolic health. So cardiovascular and metabolic health, the incidence of obesity goes on the rise, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and related comorbidities also increase. There are musculoskeletal impacts also in the form of loss of bone mineral density and increased fracture risk. All of these impact her quality of life. If you look at general studies, 84% of their women do have symptoms which will interfere with their lives. So they appreciate, or they feel menopause happening, but they don't really seek help. Almost half of these women never ask for consultations or ask whether or not something can be done. The most common, as I said, were vasomotor symptoms, almost 50%, and almost about one third to a half of women may also have genitourinary symptoms, which are troublesome. And almost 40% women never consult a doctor for these complaints. Now, we have to understand that the consequences of estrogen deficiency, the manifestations change over a period of time. So in the early period, when a woman is in the perimenopausal and early menopausal stage, the vasomotor symptoms predominate in the form of hot flushes, sweating, disturbed sleep patterns, irregular cycles, and the psychological issues like distress, etc. So these are early symptoms. And then as menopause progresses to about, say, 7, 10, 12 years, the genitourinary symptoms start to appear because of the lack of estrogen action on the vaginal mucosa. There's vaginal atrophy, dyspareunia, atrophy of the genital skin area also, and this leads to urinary incontinence. In the later stage, we have to worry about long-term poor bone health with increased risk of osteoporosis and fractures. And there is also increased risk of atherosclerosis, diabetes, and also cognitive disorders like Alzheimer's disease. Now, let's look at what are the factors that lead to adverse cardiometabolic health. We know estrogen deficiency primarily drives this change and a relative androgen excess. So what happens is a woman may have earlier gynoid obesity. That means she has more fat in the lower part of the body. But during obesity, the fat distribution changes to greater accumulation of fat in the upper body. That's the android pattern of obesity, or what we call as apple-shaped obesity. So there's increased total body fat. There is preferential accumulation of abdominal fat and the upper body fat. And at the same time, in association with this, what is happening is with age, there is also a decline in muscle mass and a relative sarcopenia. So all of these factors go in against a woman's metabolic health with increased fat, especially visceral and central fat and abdominal fat, and less muscle mass. Now, is this inevitable? Definitely not. There are factors, while this is of course hormone driven, but the lifestyle modification can play a major role in reducing the risk of the menopausal related increase in adiposity. So good nutrition with more protein intake and less carbohydrate intake, as well as increased exercise training, especially resistance training, can actually counter this effect. Is menopause a cardiovascular disease risk factor? Definitely yes. There is the increased adiposity, particularly the central adiposity. At the same time, this is associated with increased insulin resistance and increased risk of pre-diabetes or diabetes, dyslipidemia, hypertension, and also increase in sympathetic tone, endothelial dysfunction, and chronic inflammation. All of these increase the risk of cardiovascular disease in women very significantly. So a sharp increase in CV risk is seen in women as soon as they are in the perimenopausal period. What about diabetes? It has been found that shorter the reproductive lifespan of a woman, higher is her risk of diabetes. So women who have early menopause or premature menopause, their risk of diabetes, pre-diabetes and metabolic syndrome is significantly higher than women who have a normal age of menopause. What about bone health? That's another important concern for women in this age group. And as you can see, as age progresses, there is a steady decline in the bone mass as well as bone quality. And what happens during menopausal transition, right in the beginning of this period of menopausal transition, the lack of estrogen, adequate estrogen secretion, leads to a sharp decline in the bone mineral density. So women in general will be accumulating peak bone mass by till about 30 years of age, then plateau till another 10, 15 years. And as they hit menopause, there is a sharp decline in bone mineral density, and this translates into increased fracture risk. Following the menopausal transition, the decline continues with the aging. That this decline is common for both men and women, but this sharp initial decline is very typical of menopause, and women are more predisposed, therefore, to adverse bone health consequences than men. We already talked about the psychological concerns associated with menopause. Menopausal distress is a syndrome described as patients feeling nervous or tense, blue or depressed or grouchy, irritable all the time, at least 3 symptoms for the last 2 weeks. And this emotional response is often characterized by a lot of anxiety associated with menopause, the feeling of, not being important, not being taken care of, inability in coping with these transitional changes. And if you look at clinical disease, 20% of women have depression at some point during menopause, and these typically occur in the transitional period. But later on, as they settle into the late post-menopausal period, depression usually tends to go down. The strongest predictor is a prior history of depression. So if a woman has had postpartum depression or depression in her midlife, she is at a much greater risk of developing depression. So now the question is how we can smoothen this transitional period and reduce the health concerns that a woman may face. So towards a smooth transition, everything in medicine begins with a healthy lifestyle. So the role of good nutrition, balanced nutrition with macro and micronutrient adequacy is important. The food should be not rich in calories, but nutrient dense. So the nutrient quality is very important. Complex carbohydrates, a good amount of protein intake is very important because sarcopenia is happening. And also micronutrient adequacy, there should be adequate calcium, vitamin D, or other minerals, etc., and especially antioxidants, which may come from diet or from supplements. The second important focus is on exercises, and in addition to the moderate to vigorous kind of aerobic activity, the role of muscle strengthening exercises, resistance training is very important to preserve bone and muscle mass in these women. The stress reduction is important. So positive coping skills should be entertained or endorsed, and a large part of this can come from either pursuing a hobby or especially cultivating some amount of me time. That means a time for self-care. Substance abuse, again, is something that will adversely impact the health of women. So therefore, there should be a cessation of smoking, and alcohol consumption should be kept to a minimum, the recommended levels. Then we'll talk a bit about hormone therapy in these women. So what are options for all of these problems, especially menopausal symptoms like the vasomotor symptoms, genitourinary symptoms, etc.? We have options in the form of non-hormonal therapy, like for women who have clinical depression, it might be useful to use drugs like SNRIs or SSRIs. And some women may have chronic pain where, again, carbapenem or pregabalin might be helpful. There is some role for complementary and alternative therapies like plant estrogens. However, these are not well established. And the idea should be to get all of these supplements and nutrients from natural diet. The data on the use of these isoflavones and other products, actually, the evidence is highly insufficient to recommend routine therapy with these molecules. The large bit of evidence is in relation to what we call as hormone replacement therapy. In this scenario, menopause, the hormonal decline actually is a natural transition. So it is not an HRT, but actually it has been called as menopausal hormonal therapy, thereby meaning the use of estrogen and or progesterone for the control of menopausal symptoms. Now, looking at patients who have genitourinary symptoms, there are a lot of topical options for genitourinary symptoms. like the use of vaginal lubricants or moisturizers, use of topical estrogen preparations. Then we have the selective estrogen receptor modulators like ospemifene, which can be used, strengthening of pelvic floor muscles through exercises, and then there are certain surgical treatment options available. In patients who have refractory symptoms, we can consider menopausal hormonal therapy. For vasomotor symptoms, by and large, menopausal hormonal therapy is the most effective treatment in addition to lifestyle modification and forms the mainstay of treatment. Now, the principle for menopausal hormonal therapy, one thing, we'll talk about this again later, but if the patient has no uterus, let's say a woman has already had hysterectomy in the past, we can give only estrogen. However, in patients who have estrogen, intact uterus, estrogen alone can increase the risk of uterine cancers, endometrial carcinoma. Therefore, to reduce that risk, the treatment should always be a combination of estrogen plus the progesterone therapy. Now, looking at what are the concerns with MHT, why can't we offer all women menopausal hormonal therapy? There have been signals of increased breast cancer risk. We'll try and analyze how important those signals are. There is increased risk of thromboembolism, cardiovascular disease, and stroke. So these are some of the signals that came from one of the largest trials, that is the Women's Health Initiative trial, which included over 27,000 women, and they were treated with estrogen progesterone in the form of conjugated equine estradiol and medroxyprogesterone acetate, or estrogen alone. What was the purpose of this trial? This trial is often misunderstood and misinterpreted, because the purpose was not to see whether these menopausal hormonal therapies impact a woman's quality of life or symptom benefit. The purpose of this was whether it can affect the risk of coronary heart disease and other things. Safety signals, of course, were also assessed. And what was seen was there was an increased risk of breast cancer, thromboembolism, etc. But now that we have the full data of WHI, we look at it carefully. What was the study population? The study population was older. In fact, the average age was not the early postmenopausal age, but the late postmenopausal age of 63. So a woman has menopause on an average, let's say at 48. We are actually giving hormone therapy about 15 years later, wherein the menopausal symptoms of vasomotor symptoms and genitourinary symptoms have already ameliorated by that time. So 66% of these patients were older than 60 years. So we actually not looking at the right patient population. They were obese, obesity, so they were high risk population. They were already having 7% had established cardiovascular disease, 35% had already hypertension. Smoking was also strangely prevalent in almost 50% of women. So the objective was not to treat symptoms. The choice of HRT that was used, conjugated equine estrogen or DMPA, they are not the current HRTs that we use. And the extrapolation was, we cannot extrapolate that data to a younger population of, let's say, 50, 55 years, wherein possibly the role of MHT might be actually important. Now, looking at the data again in terms of subgroup analysis, so for women who had a longer duration of disease, there was an increased risk of coronary heart disease, stroke, DVT, and breast cancer for sure. What was definitely reduced was fracture risk. So bone density improved. Risk of diabetes was actually improved. But let's look at patients who were younger. That means they had just with estrogen alone, none of these risks were actually increased. Only there was a slightly increased risk of DVT. But now we have to understand what is called as the timing hypothesis, that atherosclerosis begins around this time period, perimenopausal age group, and by the late postmenopausal period, it's already established. So estrogen is not really going to give us a benefit in terms of cardiovascular disease at this time. So if you reanalyze WHO based in WHI data based on the age categories, look at carefully the 50 to 60 year age group. The risk of coronary heart disease is actually reduced with the menopausal hormonal therapy. Stroke remains neutral. There is definitely a slight increased risk of deep vein thrombosis. Breast cancer risk also actually comes down, total mortality comes down, and the global index of outcomes actually is much better. So there was actually a trend to reduction in coronary heart disease and mortality in younger women when they were offered the MHT. It was the older women who did not really fare much benefits. Now, later trials which have used the newer estrogen formulations, which have studied younger population and women who had symptomatic, who was overtly symptomatic for menopausal symptoms. In all of those trials, you can clearly see there is a trend towards cardioprotection. And of course, bone benefits remain, and the VTE risk with transdermal estrogen is much, much lower than occurs with oral estrogen. So this gives the idea of what again we call as the timing hypothesis, that when given in the early postmenopausal period, that means within 10 years of menopause, MHT actually has cardioprotective effects. The risk of cardiovascular disease, primarily due to thromboembolic events, increases in late postmenopausal period. So that means this is the window of opportunity we have. We should not be treating late postmenopausal women with MHT. What about the risk of diabetes? Again, we have both the trials, HERS and WHI, showing significant reduction in the risk of diabetes in menopausal women. What about bone loss? Clear data from several studies that there is reduction in bone loss. Bone density is actually preserved or slightly improved, and vertebral, non-vertebral fractures significantly reduced. Therefore, guidelines now recommend that women who are postmenopausal, early postmenopausal, we can use MHT for prevention of fractures if the woman is less than 60, less than 10 years postmenopause, and in whom other frontline therapies like bisphosphonates, denosumab, or teriparatide are not appropriate, and especially if they have vasomotor symptoms which are likely to improve and they don't have contraindications. So looking at oncological risk-benefit profile, there is a small increased risk of breast cancer we have to appreciate. So women at risk of breast cancer, we should avoid this treatment. So to conclude, let's see where to use MHT. Assess patients for symptoms, age less than 60, less than 10 years with symptoms, consider MHT. If then also rule out if there is a high risk of VT, that means a patient has had a past stroke or MI, etc., or there is a high risk of breast cancers or active liver disease. Again, if these are excluded, then you can consider other risk factors like diabetes, hypertriglyceridemia, etc. If these are present, consider using transdermal preparations of estrogen. And the other, of course, is if uterus is present, it has to be estrogen plus progesterone or Tivolone. And if uterus is absent, estrogen alone. So we have to individualize risk-benefit ratio, hypogonadism and premature menopause or treatment of symptomatic women. Yes, MHT has a role. Prevention of osteoporosis, MHT has a role. For other problems like depression, cognitive benefits, CVD, etc., we have to go for focused treatment. So I'll conclude here. And with this joke, I leave you all of there. So we have to appreciate that menopause is an important period. We have to understand a woman's problems there, and we should be able to give her logical and reasonable solutions for her problems. Thank you.